They say an executioner doesn't hesitate. That mercy dies the first time you're ordered to break someone who begs. Cale Blackthorn had ended that weakness in himself years ago, or so he believed. Until the moment his hand closed around the throat of a trembling Omega, and his entire world shattered into something he couldn't control. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to a story that's about to wreck you in the best way possible. I'm so glad you're here. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you team love conquers all or team some bonds are too dangerous to keep? And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. Now let's dive in because this story, it starts with blood, chains, and a choice that will break everything. Lyra Vale had stopped shaking an hour ago. Not because the fear had left her. Fear was a living thing now, coiled in her chest like a second heartbeat. But her body had run out of adrenaline. Her wrists were raw beneath the iron cuffs, and the silver-laced metal had burned through her skin until she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. The crowd surrounding her was a blur of snarling faces and glowing eyes, wolves who had once nodded to her in the marketplace, who had brought their children to her for feverfew and willowbark, who had smiled when she'd stitched their wounds. Now they wanted her dead. She knelt in the center of the stone circle, the punishment ground, where grass refused to grow. The earth here had drunk too much blood. The Pack's council sat elevated on carved thrones, their expressions carved from the same cold stone. And at the head of them all, Alpha Gregor Ashford watched her with eyes like winter, pale, merciless, and empty of anything human. Lyra Vale, he said, and his voice carried across the silent crowd like a blade drawn from a sheath. You stand accused of treason, of poisoning the bloodline, of conspiring with rogues to bring ruin upon this pack. She wanted to scream that it was a lie, that she had done nothing but heal, nothing but serve. But her throat was too dry, her voice too small, and no one would believe in Omega. Not when the Alpha's own son had fallen ill. Not when 3 council members had collapsed at the same feast. Not when someone had planted wolfsbane and nightshade in her healing cabin. The sentence, Gregor continued, is punishment by the hand of our enforcer. You will be marked as disgraced, cast into the wilds, and left to the mercy of the moon. Which meant no mercy at all. Lyra's wolf whimpered inside her, small and terrified. We didn't do this. We didn't. But it didn't matter. The crowd parted, and he walked through. Cale Blackthorn, the Alpha King's executioner. The wolf they whispered about in the dark. The one who had never failed a punishment, never hesitated, never flinched. He was massive, taller than any wolf she'd ever seen, shoulders broad enough to block out the torchlight. His hair was dark as midnight, tied back from a face that looked like it had been carved by something cruel and precise. Scars traced his jaw, his throat, his hands. His eyes were the color of burnt amber, and they were empty. Completely empty. He moved like violence contained in skin. Every step was deliberate. Controlled. He didn't look at the crowd. Didn't acknowledge the Alpha. His gaze locked onto Lyra, and she felt the weight of it like a hand closing around her heart. This is it, she thought. This is how I die. Cale stopped 3 feet from her. He was dressed in black leather and steel, weapons strapped to his thighs and back. A silver whip coiled at his belt, the kind that would scar a wolf permanently, that would make sure she never healed right. That she would carry the shame forever. If she survived long enough to carry anything. Stand, he said. His voice was low, rough. It didn't sound like it had been used for kindness in a very long time. Lyra tried. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The chains were too heavy, the silver poisoning her system, making her weak and dizzy. She stumbled, and a ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Cale's jaw tightened. He reached down, and Lyra flinched so hard she nearly fell again. But he didn't strike her. His hand closed around her upper arm, and he hauled her to her feet with a strength that should have hurt but somehow didn't. For just a second, His grip was almost careful. Then he let go and his expression went cold again. "You were accused of treason," he said, loud enough for the pack to hear. "Do you confess?" Lyra's breath came in short, jagged gasps. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "No." The word came out broken. Barely a whisper. Cale stared at her. Something flickered behind his gaze, too fast for her to catch. Then it was gone. "Then you will be marked," he said. "And exiled." He reached for the whip. And Lyra closed her eyes. Please, she prayed to the moon, to the goddess, to anything listening. Please let it be fast. Cale's fingers brushed the scarred skin of her shoulder, just a whisper of contact as he positioned her for the first strike. She was shaking again now. He could feel it. Could smell the terror rolling off her in waves, mixing with the bitter tang of silver burn and the faint, floral scent of herbs that clung to her skin. He had done this 100 times. It never bothered him. But his hand wouldn't move. His wolf was snarling. Not at her, at him. Furious. Desperate. It clawed at his mind, and Cale shoved it down with the brutal efficiency he'd perfected over years of discipline. He didn't have a wolf anymore. He had a weapon. And weapons didn't hesitate. He raised the whip. And then he touched her neck. Just to steady her. Just to angle her correctly for the strike. His palm settled against the curve where her shoulder met her throat. And the world exploded. The bond didn't snap into place. It detonated. A shockwave of recognition so violent, so absolute, that Cale's knees nearly buckled. His wolf roared to the surface, ripping through every barrier he'd built, and for the first time in years, Cale Blackthorn felt everything. Mate. Mate. The word ricocheted through his skull like a bullet. His hand was still on her skin, and he could feel her pulse, rapid, terrified, alive, and his wolf was screaming at him to claim her, protect her, kill anyone who dared stand between them. Lyra gasped. She felt it too. Her head snapped up, and her eyes, those wide, forest green eyes, locked onto his. Confusion. Shock. And then the worst thing he'd ever seen. Fear. She thought this was part of the punishment. She thought he was going to hurt her worse. Cale's hand tightened on her shoulder, not to harm, but to ground himself, because his entire body was shaking now and the crowd was watching and the alpha was waiting and this couldn't be happening, this couldn't be real. But it was. The mate bond burned between them like a living wire. And Cale Blackthorn, the wolf who had sworn never to mate, never to weaken himself with love, stood in front of 300 wolves holding the one thing he'd tried his entire life to avoid. The whip fell from his hand. He pulled her closer. And in a voice loud enough for the entire pack to hear, rough and ruined and absolutely certain, he said, "She's mine." The crowd erupted. What do you think happens next? Drop your wildest predictions below, and if you're already hooked, smash that subscribe button because this story is about to get so much more intense. You're not ready. The silence that followed Cale's declaration lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos. The crowd exploded into snarls and shouts, wolves pressing forward against the circle's boundary, their eyes flashing gold and silver in the torchlight. The council members rose from their thrones, faces twisted in shock and fury. And Alpha Gregor didn't move at all. He simply stared at Cale with an expression that promised death. But Cale didn't care. His entire world had narrowed to the woman trembling in his grip. Lyra was staring up at him with those wide green eyes, and he could see the exact moment her brain caught up to what had just happened. The confusion bled into disbelief. Then horror. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't. This isn't." "Quiet." His voice came out rougher than he intended, and she flinched. He felt that flinch like a knife between his ribs. His wolf snarled at him, furious that he'd frightened her, desperate to comfort her. Cale had spent years learning to ignore his wolf's instincts. He was discovering that the mate bond made that impossible. He could feel her terror, could taste it on the back of his tongue. And underneath that, pain. So much pain. The silver in her chains was burning through her system, poisoning her slowly, and his wolf was howling at him to remove them. Free her. Make it stop. Kale's hands moved before his brain caught up. He grabbed the chains and pulled, using the brute strength that had made him useful to the alpha. The iron link snapped. The cuffs fell away. Lyra gasped as the silver stopped burning her, and the sound went straight through him. Kale Blackthorn. Alpha Gregor's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The crowd fell silent instantly. Explain yourself. Kale turned to face the alpha, keeping Lyra behind him. His body had shifted into a defensive stance without conscious thought, shielding her from the pack's line of sight. From their judgment. From their teeth. She's my mate, he said flatly. I claim her under pack law. She is a traitor. Gregor descended the steps slowly, deliberately. He was smaller than Kale, but older, more controlled, and the power of an alpha rolled off him in waves. Accused of poisoning my bloodline. You would claim a wolf who tried to murder my son. I would claim my mate. Kale's voice didn't rise, but every wolf in the circle felt the weight of it. Pack law is clear. A mate bond supersedes all other claims. Pack law also states that an enforcer who fails his duty forfeits his position. Gregor stopped 10 feet away, his pale eyes narrowed. You were ordered to punish her. To mark her as disgraced. Instead, you've made a spectacle of yourself and endangered this pack's justice. The bond doesn't lie. Kale's jaw tightened. If she's my mate, the moon chose her. Are you questioning the goddess? It was a calculated risk. Invoking the moon's authority was the only card he had left, and they both knew it. Gregor's expression darkened, but he couldn't outright deny the mate bond without looking like he was defying the goddess herself. The alpha's eyes shifted to Lyra, still half hidden behind Kale's broad frame. Then let her speak. Let your mate defend herself against the charges. Kale felt Lyra stiffen. Her hand, small, scarred from years of working with herbs and fire, gripped the back of his leather vest like she was drowning, and he was the only solid thing left. I didn't do it, she said, and her voice was stronger than Kale expected. Still shaking, but audible. I'm a healer. I've never hurt anyone. I don't even know how to make the poison they're accusing me of. And yet we found nightshade and wolfsbane in your cabin, one of the council members called out. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a face like carved granite. Hidden among your supplies. I use wolfsbane for tinctures. Lyra's voice cracked. In controlled doses, it treats fever. And nightshade, I've never even touched nightshade. Someone put that there. Someone framed me. Convenient, another council member sneered. The accused claims innocence. How original. The crowd rumbled agreement. Kale could smell their bloodlust, their eagerness for violence. They wanted a villain. They wanted someone to blame for the alpha's son falling ill, for the instability that had rocked the pack. And Lyra, small, powerless Omega, was an easy target. Too easy. Kale's analytical mind, the one that had kept him alive through dozens of conflicts, began to turn. The evidence against her was almost too perfect. Poison found in her cabin. No witnesses. No proof except the word of wolves who had never trusted Omegas anyway. And the timing. The alpha's son had fallen ill 3 days ago. The same night Lyra had been called to the pack house to treat a council member's daughter for a fever. She'd been in the pack house. With access. But also visible. Accounted for. If she'd wanted to poison anyone, that would have been the worst possible time to do it. Alpha. Kale's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. I request a formal investigation. Gregor's eyes narrowed. You question my justice? I question the evidence. Kale held his ground. If she's my mate, I have the right to demand proof before punishment. That's pack law too. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, Gregor smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Very well, he said softly. You want an investigation? You'll have one. But until the matter is resolved, she remains in custody. Your custody, Blackthorn. You've claimed her. She's your responsibility now. If she runs, you forfeit your life. If she harms another pack member, you both die. And if the investigation proves her guilt, he paused, letting the threat hang in the air. You'll be the one to execute her. Personally. Kale's blood turned to ice. But he didn't hesitate. Agreed. Behind him, Lyra made a small, broken sound. Kale's quarters were in the north wing of the pack house, isolated, defensible, and exactly as unwelcoming as he'd intended when he'd chosen them. Stone walls. Minimal furniture. Weapons everywhere. It was a space designed for a wolf who didn't plan to share it with anyone. Now he was ushering his terrified mate inside and trying not to think about how badly he'd just destroyed both their lives. Lyra stood in the center of the room like she expected the floor to open up and swallow her. Her wrists were still bleeding sluggishly where the silver had burned her, and her dress, a simple brown thing that hung off her too-thin frame, was torn and filthy. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Because she probably hadn't. They would have stopped feeding her the moment she was accused. Kale's wolf snarled viciously. Starving her. Hurting her. Our mate. He shoved the wolf down and moved to the corner where he kept his field supplies. Medical kit. Clean water. He grabbed both and turned back to find Lyra watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Sit, he said, nodding to the chair near the cold fireplace. She didn't move. I'm not going to hurt you. The words came out stiff. Awkward. Kale had never been good at comfort. Sit down before you fall down. Why? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was something sharp underneath it. Something that hadn't broken yet. Why did you claim me? Kale set the supplies on the table with more force than necessary. Because you're my mate. I don't believe you. He turned to stare at her. You felt the bond. I felt something. Lyra's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. But that doesn't make sense. You're an enforcer. I'm an Omega. And you were sent to destroy me. Her voice cracked on the last word. So why would the moon? I don't know. The admission came out harsher than he meant it to. I don't understand it either. But the bond is real. And pack law protects you now. So sit down. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then slowly, she sank into the chair. Her legs seemed to give out halfway, and she nearly collapsed into it. Kale knelt in front of her, and she went absolutely rigid. I'm going to clean those burns, he said quietly, carefully. Like she was a wild animal he might spook. The silver needs to be neutralized or it'll keep poisoning you. I need to touch your wrists. Is that acceptable? Lyra blinked at him. Like she couldn't quite believe he was asking permission. Yes, she whispered finally. Kale took her left hand. Her skin was soft under his callous fingers, delicate in a way that made something in his chest twist painfully. The silver burns were worse up close, angry red welts that had blistered and torn. He'd seen wolves lose hands to silver poisoning. He worked in silence, cleaning the wounds with a solution that would draw out the silver, then wrapping them in clean bandages. Lyra didn't make a sound, but he could feel her trembling. Could smell the fear still rolling off her. She was terrified of him. And he couldn't blame her. I've never had a mate, he said suddenly. The words surprised him as much as her. Never wanted one. I thought the bond was a weakness. Something that made you vulnerable. Lyra said nothing. I've done terrible things, Kale continued, finishing the bandage on her right wrist. As an enforcer. I've hurt people. Killed people. I don't expect you to trust me. Or forgive me for what I am. He looked up and met her eyes. But I won't let them kill you. Whatever it takes. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the smallest crack in the wall of her fear. I didn't poison anyone, she said softly. I swear on the moon I didn't do it. I know. Her eyes widened. You believe me? You're a healer. Kale stood, putting space between them because the urge to touch her again was becoming overwhelming. Healers don't poison. And the evidence against you is too convenient. Someone wanted you accused. He paused. Do you have enemies? Anyone who would want to frame you? Lyra laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I'm an Omega. Everyone's my enemy. It was meant to be a joke, but Kale heard the truth underneath it. Omegas were the lowest rank in pack hierarchy. Overlooked. Underestimated. Used. Disposable. His wolf was still snarling, furious at the thought of anyone treating their mate that way. Not anymore, Kale said quietly. You're my mate now. That makes you untouchable. Unless the investigation proves I'm guilty. Lyra's voice went hollow. Then you have to kill me yourself. Those were the terms. Kale's jaw tightened. It won't come to that. You don't know that. I'll make sure it doesn't come to that. They stared at each other across the small room. Outside, Kale could hear the pack settling for the night, the murmur of voices and the distant howls of perimeter guards. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Everything except what was happening in this room. Finally, Lyra looked away. I don't understand you, she whispered. I don't understand any of this. That makes two of us. Kale moved toward the door. I'm going to stand guard. You should rest. Where will you sleep? I don't. It wasn't entirely true, but close enough. Enforcers learn to survive on catnaps and adrenaline. Lyra stood abruptly. You can't just, I won't take your bed. I can sleep on the floor. You'll sleep in the bed. His voice came out harder than he meant it to. Lyra flinched again, and Kale forced himself to soften his tone. Please. You're hurt. You need rest. Just let me do this one thing right. For a moment, he thought she'd argue. Then her shoulders sagged, exhaustion finally winning over pride. Okay, she said quietly. She moved toward the bed like she was walking to her own execution. Kale watched her climb under the rough blankets, watched her curl into a ball so small it made his chest ache. He turned away before she could see his expression. Kale. He froze. It was the first time she'd used his name. Thank you, she whispered. For claiming me. Even if I don't understand why. Kale's hands curled into fists at his sides. Get some sleep, Lyra. He left the room before he did something stupid. Like promise her things he had no right to promise. Like swear he'd burn down the entire pack if they tried to take her from him. Like admit that the moment the bond had snapped into place, his entire world had shifted on its axis, and he'd never be the same wolf again. Is Kale about to become the most protective mate ever, or is he hiding something darker? Drop your theories below. Kale didn't sleep. He stood outside his door for 3 hours, listening to Lyra's breathing slowly even out as exhaustion finally dragged her under. Every instinct screamed at him to go back inside, to stay close, to guard her while she was vulnerable. But he forced himself to remain in the hallway. She needed space. Distance. She needed to not be terrified every time she looked at him. Around midnight, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Heavy. Deliberate. Kale's hand went to the blade at his hip before he consciously registered the movement. Commander Dane Corrick emerged from the shadows. He was Kale's only friend, if you could call their relationship friendship. They'd trained together, fought together, bled together. Dane understood what it meant to be the Alpha's weapon. You've lost your mind, Dane said without preamble. His voice was low, careful not to carry. The entire pack is talking about nothing else. Kale Blackthorn, the wolf who's never shown mercy, claiming a traitor as his mate in the middle of her own punishment. He shook his head. What were you thinking? I wasn't. Kale's voice was flat. The bond just happened. Bonds don't just happen in the middle of an execution. Dane moved closer, his expression serious. Kale, listen to me. Gregor is furious. He wanted that Omega dead, and you've complicated everything. If you can't prove her innocence, I will. How? Dane's eyes narrowed. You have no evidence. No witnesses. And the council is convinced she's guilty. They want her to be guilty because the alternative is that someone in the inner circle is a traitor. Someone close to the Alpha. Kale had already reached the same conclusion. Then I'll find out who. You have 3 days. Dane glanced at the door behind Kale. That's all Gregor's giving you before he demands a resolution. 3 days to investigate, find the real culprit, and prove your mate's innocence. Or, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I know the terms. Cale's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. Will you? Dane's voice dropped even lower. Because if she's guilty, Cale, if there's even a chance she's guilty, you need to walk away now. The mate bond is strong, but it's not worth your life. Not worth your position. You've worked too hard to throw it all away for an Omega you just met. Something cold and dangerous moved through Cale's chest. She's innocent. You don't know that. I know. The words came out with more force than he intended. She's not a killer, Dane. And someone went to a lot of trouble to make her look like one. Dane studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're in deep already, aren't you? The bond's got its hooks in you. Cale said nothing. Fine. Dane pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Then you'll want to see this. I did some digging after your declaration. Found something interesting in the healer's records. Cale took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a ledger page, a list of herbs and supplies requisitioned from Lyra's cabin over the past 6 months. His eyes scanned down the entries until they caught on one name that appeared repeatedly. Nightshade. Requested by Councilwoman Mara Voss. Nightshade isn't illegal, Dane said quietly. In controlled doses, it has medicinal uses. But Mara's been requisitioning it every 2 weeks for the past 4 months. That's excessive. Cale's mind turned over the information. Councilwoman Mara Voss. Silver-haired. Sharp-tongued. She'd been one of the loudest voices demanding Lyra's execution. Why would a council member need that much nightshade? He asked. That's what you need to find out. Dane hesitated. But be careful. Mara's connected. Her daughter is engaged to the Alpha's nephew. If you accuse her without proof, I'll get proof. Cale. Thank you. Cale met his friend's eyes. For this. For not turning your back on me. Dane's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet. I still think you're insane. But, he glanced at the door again. If she really is innocent, if someone did frame her, then she deserves better than what this pack was going to give her. Just, don't lose yourself in this. The bond can make you do stupid things. Too late, Cale said quietly. Dane left without another word. Cale stood alone in the hallway, staring at the ledger page. A lead. Finally. It wasn't much, but it was something. He'd start with Mara, trace the nightshade, find out who had access to Lyra's cabin. He'd find the real traitor. He had to. Behind him, he heard movement from inside his quarters. Soft footsteps. Then Lyra's voice, muffled through the door. Cale. She sounded scared. He was inside before conscious thought caught up to instinct. Lyra stood in the center of the room, wrapped in one of his blankets, her face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. She looked small, fragile, and completely terrified. What's wrong? Cale scanned the room for threats, finding none. Are you hurt? I heard voices. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought someone was coming for me. The fear in her eyes made his chest tighten painfully. No one's coming for you. I won't let them. You can't promise that. Lyra's hands twisted in the blanket. You heard what the Alpha said. 3 days. And then I'll have found the real traitor. Cale moved closer slowly, carefully. I have a lead. Someone who's been requisitioning large amounts of nightshade. I'm going to follow it. Who? He hesitated. Councilwoman Mara Voss. Lyra's eyes widened. Mara? But she was one of the ones who accused me. She wouldn't. She stopped, something shifting in her expression. Wait. Her daughter. Alara. What about her? She's been sick. Lyra's words came faster now, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking together. For months. Nothing serious. Headaches, fatigue, nausea. Mara brought her to me several times. I gave her willow bark and chamomile, but nothing seemed to help. Cale's mind raced. What are the symptoms of long-term nightshade exposure? Headaches. fatigue, nausea. Lyra's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. Oh gods. You think Mara's been poisoning her own daughter? I think someone's been using nightshade from your supplies to make it look like you're the source. Kale pulled out the ledger page. Look at the dates. The requisitions line up with when the Alpha's son fell ill, and with when the council members collapsed. Lyra took the paper with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the entries, and Kale watched her expression shift from confusion to understanding to fury. Someone took my supplies, she said quietly. Used my herbs. Made it look like I was the one poisoning people. Her hands clenched into fists, crumpling the paper. They used my work, everything I've built, every person I've helped, and turned it into a weapon against me. The rage in her voice surprised him. This wasn't the broken, terrified Omega from the punishment circle. This was someone who'd been wronged, and who was finally realizing the depth of that wrong. This was the woman his wolf had recognized as mate. I'm going to find out who, Kale said. And I'm going to make them pay. How? Lyra looked up at him, and there was something fierce in her eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. Mara's on the council. She has power. Connections. Even if you prove she's been requisitioning Nightshade, that doesn't prove she's the one who framed me. It doesn't prove anything except that she had access. She was right. And Kale hated that she was right. Then we need more, he said. We need to find out who had access to your cabin. Who planted the poison. Who? A knock at the door made them both freeze. Kale's hand went to his blade. Stay behind me. He moved to the door, every sense on high alert. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Kale pulled the door open a crack. A young wolf stood in the hallway, barely more than a boy, maybe 17. He wore the livery of a pack runner, and his eyes were wide with nervousness. Message for Enforcer Blackthorn, he said quickly. From the Alpha. You're summoned to the pack house. Immediately. Why? The Alpha's son. Elias. The boy's voice dropped. He's taken a turn for the worse. They think he's dying. The pack house was in chaos. Kale could smell the panic before he even reached the main hall, fear and desperation mixing with the acrid scent of sickness. Wolves crowded the corridors, their voices raised in worry and anger. The Alpha's son was the heir. If he died, the pack would fracture. Kale pushed through the crowd, Lyra a silent shadow at his back. He told her to stay in his quarters, but she'd refused. If Elias is dying from poison, she'd said, I might be able to help. I'm a healer. Let me heal. He hadn't been able to argue with that. They reached the Alpha's private chambers. 2 guards flanked the door and both tensed when they saw Lyra. The traitor isn't allowed, one started. She's with me, Kale cut him off. And she's a healer. If there's any chance she can help Elias, the Alpha will want her inside. The guards exchanged uncertain looks. Finally, one opened the door. The room beyond was thick with the smell of sweat and sickness. Elias Ashford lay in the center of a massive bed, his skin pale as death, his breathing shallow and ragged. Alpha Gregor stood beside him, his hand on his son's forehead, and for the first time since Kale had known him, the Alpha looked human. Afraid. Blackthorn. Gregor's voice was hoarse. Why did you bring her? She's a healer. Kale kept his tone neutral. If anyone can help your son, it's her. She's the one who poisoned him. Then you have nothing to lose by letting her try. Kale met the Alpha's eyes. If she makes him worse, I'll execute her myself. Right here. Right now. But if she can save him. Gregor stared at Lyra with an expression somewhere between hatred and desperate hope. Finally, he stepped back. Fine, he ground out. But if he dies, so does she. Lyra moved forward without hesitation. She approached the bed like she'd done this 1,000 times, her fear locked away behind a mask of professional calm. Kale watched her place her hand on Elias's forehead, watched her eyes close as she assessed him. He's burning up, she murmured. Fever, rapid heartbeat, pupils dilated. She lifted his hand, examining his fingernails. bluish tint. Difficulty breathing. She turned to Gregor. How long has he been like this? 2 hours. The Alpha's voice was strained. He collapsed during dinner. Started convulsing. We've tried everything. This isn't Nightshade, Lyra interrupted. Her voice was sharp. Certain. Nightshade poisoning looks different. This is belladonna. Mixed with something else. Something to accelerate the absorption. What does that mean? Gregor demanded. It means whoever poisoned him did it tonight. Lyra's eyes snapped up to meet Kale's. At dinner. Recently. This is a fresh dose, a massive one. He's been building up a tolerance to smaller amounts over time, but this, she looked back at Elias. This was meant to kill him. The room went deathly silent. Can you save him? Gregor's voice was barely controlled. Maybe. Lyra was already moving, pulling supplies from the healer's kit on the nearby table. I need activated charcoal. Milk thistle. And atropine. Do you have atropine? I don't know. Find it. Lyra snapped, and Kale felt a surge of pride at the command in her voice. This was her element. Her expertise. Now, we have maybe 20 minutes before the poison stops his heart. The room exploded into motion. Gregor shouted orders. Wolf scattered to find the supplies. And Lyra worked with steady, practiced hands, preparing what she had, measuring dosages with precision that spoke of years of training. Kale stayed close, watching her work, watching the way her fear had transformed into focus. She was magnificent. And she was innocent. No one who could work this calmly, this skillfully to save a life was capable of taking one through poison. Kale. Lyra's voice was urgent. I need you to hold him down. When I give him the charcoal, he's going to fight. His body will try to reject it. Kale moved to the bed, placing his hands on Elias's shoulders. The young wolf's skin was burning hot, his muscles already starting to seize. A wolf burst back into the room carrying a vial. Atropine. Lyra grabbed it, checked the contents, and measured out a careful dose. This is going to hurt him, she warned Gregor. But it's the only way. Do it, the Alpha said. Lyra administered the treatment with steady hands. Elias convulsed violently, his body arching off the bed. Kale held him down with all his strength while Lyra worked, forcing the charcoal mixture down his throat, monitoring his pulse, adjusting dosages with a speed and confidence that was breathtaking. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Elias's convulsions slowed. His breathing evened out. The blue tint began to fade from his lips. And finally, his eyes fluttered open. Father. His voice was weak, confused. Gregor made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. He gripped his son's hand like he'd never let go. You're alive. You're alive. The room erupted in relieved voices. But Kale was watching Lyra. She'd stepped back from the bed, her hands shaking now that the crisis was over, her face pale. She looked like she might collapse. He moved to her side, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. You did it, he said quietly. He's not out of danger yet. But there was satisfaction in her voice. Pride. He'll need monitoring for the next 24 hours. But he should recover. Lyra Vale. Alpha Gregor's voice made them both turn. The Alpha was staring at Lyra with an expression Kale couldn't quite read. You saved my son's life. I'm a healer, Lyra said simply. It's what I do. Even when accused of being the one who poisoned him in the first place? Especially then. Lyra's voice was steady. Because I knew I didn't do it. And I knew whoever did is still out there. Still poisoning people. Your son was given a fresh dose tonight, Alpha. At dinner. Which means the real traitor is someone with access to your table. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Someone close to the Alpha. Someone trusted. Someone who'd framed an innocent Omega to hide their crimes. Gregor's eyes narrowed. Find them, he said to Kale. I'm giving you full authority to investigate. Question anyone. Search anywhere. Find the wolf who did this to my son. I will. Kale's hand tightened on Lyra's elbow, a protective gesture he couldn't quite suppress. And when I do, They'll wish they'd never been born. They were halfway back to Kale's quarters when Lyra suddenly stopped in the middle of the corridor. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Kale's senses went on high alert. "What?" "At dinner. You said Elias was poisoned at dinner." Lyra turned to face him, her expression troubled. "But I recognize the progression. The symptoms. He's been building up a tolerance, which means he's been exposed to small doses over weeks. Maybe months. So the same thing happened with the council members who collapsed." Lyra's voice grew more urgent. "They didn't die. They got sick, but they recovered. Just like Elias will recover. Whoever's doing this," she paused. "They're not trying to kill anyone." Kale frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Why poison people without killing them?" "I don't know." Lyra's brow furrowed. Unless the poisoning isn't the point. Unless it's a distraction. A way to create chaos. To make everyone paranoid and suspicious while the real plan happens somewhere else. A chill ran down Kale's spine. What real plan? Before Lyra could answer, a scream echoed through the pack house. "Hi," terrified. Coming from the direction of the council chambers. Kale and Lyra ran. They reached the chambers to find wolves crowding the doorway, their voices raised in shock and horror. Kale pushed through the crowd, Lyra close behind him. Inside, Councilwoman Mara Voss lay on the floor. Dead. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Foam flecked her lips. And clutched in her hand was a vial, empty except for traces of a dark liquid. Nightshade. "She poisoned herself," someone whispered. But Kale knelt beside the body, his trained eye catching details others missed. The angle of her head. The bruising on her throat. The way her fingers were positioned around the vial. Too perfect, too deliberate. "No," he said quietly. "She was murdered. And someone wanted it to look like suicide." He looked up and met Lyra's eyes across the body. The real traitor had just made their first mistake. They'd gotten desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. The council chambers had been sealed. Kale stood over Mara Voss's body, his mind working through the evidence with cold precision. The other council members hovered near the doorway, their faces pale with shock. Alpha Gregor had been summoned, but he'd remained with his son, a choice that spoke volumes about how much this latest death had shaken him. "Everyone out," Kale ordered. "This is a crime scene." "You can't just," one of the council members started. "The Alpha gave me full authority." Kale's voice cut like a blade. "Unless you'd like to explain why you're interfering with a murder investigation?" They left. All except Lyra, who stood in the corner with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at Mara's body with an expression Kale couldn't quite read. "You should go too," he said quietly. "You don't need to see this." "Yes, I do." Lyra's voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor underneath. "Mara was one of the wolves who wanted me dead. Who screamed for my execution. And now she trailed off. I should feel relieved. Or vindicated. But I just feel sad," Kale finished. Lyra nodded. She was someone's mother. Someone's friend. And whoever killed her used my nightshade to do it. She moved closer, her healer's instincts overriding her discomfort. "May I?" Kale stepped back, watching as Lyra knelt beside the body. Her hands were gentle as she examined Mara, checking her eyes, her throat, the way the foam had dried on her lips. "Belladonna," Lyra murmured. "Same as what was used on Elias, but a much higher concentration. This dose would kill within minutes." She lifted Mara's hand, studying the vial. But look at her fingers. No trembling. No spasms. If she'd drunk this herself, there would be signs of struggle. The body fights this kind of poison. So someone forced it down her throat. Kale crouched beside her. Made it look like suicide to close the investigation. If Mara's dead, and we find evidence in her quarters linking her to the poisonings, the case is solved. The traitor is dead. Everyone can rest easy. Except she wasn't the traitor. Lyra's green eyes met his. Was she? No, Kale studied the body with grim certainty. She was a loose end. Someone who knew too much. Or who was being used as a scapegoat, just like you were. Lyra sat back on her heels, her expression troubled. The ledger showed she was requisitioning Nightshade. Large amounts. Why would she need that much unless she was involved? That's what we need to find out. Cale stood, offering Lyra his hand. She hesitated for just a moment before taking it, and the contact sent a jolt through him, the mate bond humming with satisfaction at even this small touch. We're going to search her quarters. Find out what she knew. And who wanted her silenced. Mara Voss's home was a modest cottage on the eastern edge of Pack territory. Tasteful. Well kept. The kind of place that spoke of quiet dignity rather than wealth. The kind of place that didn't match someone orchestrating a poisoning conspiracy. Cale picked the lock with practiced ease, a skill that made Lyra raise her eyebrows but say nothing. They slipped inside as the last light faded from the sky. The interior was exactly what he'd expected. Comfortable furniture. Family portraits on the walls. A kitchen that smelled faintly of herbs and bread. Normal. Ordinary. Except for the locked cabinet in the study. Cale forced it open to find dozens of vials, carefully labeled and organized. Nightshade. Belladonna. Wolfsbane. Hemlock. Enough poison to kill half the pack. Gods, Lyra breathed. She was involved. Maybe. Cale examined the vials more closely. Or maybe someone wanted us to think she was. He pulled out one of the containers, holding it up to the lamplight. Look at the labels. The handwriting. Lyra leaned in. That's not Mara's writing. I've seen her requisition forms. Her handwriting is much neater. More controlled. This is, she frowned. This is almost deliberately messy. Like someone trying to disguise their hand. Cale set the vial down carefully. Someone planted this. Probably the same night they killed her. They're trying to tie up loose ends. Make it look like Mara was the traitor all along, and she killed herself out of guilt. But why? Lyra's voice rose with frustration. What's the point of all this? The poisonings, the frame-ups, the murders, what are they trying to accomplish? I don't know yet. Cale moved through the study, looking for anything else that seemed out of place. But there has to be a connection. Something that ties all the victims together. Elias is the Alphazair. The council members who got sick are all influential. Mara was on the council. And you, he stopped, turning to face her. You're an Omega healer. Low ranking. No political power. Why would anyone bother framing you? Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Because no one would defend me. I'm easy to blame. Easy to dispose of. She met his eyes. I was never the real target. I was just convenient. The matter-of-fact way she said it made something in Cale's chest twist painfully. She'd accepted her place in the pack hierarchy so completely that she didn't even question why someone would use her as a scapegoat. You're not disposable, he said roughly. Not to me. Lyra's expression softened. The mate bond talking? Maybe. Cale moved closer without meaning to. But I meant what I said earlier. You saved Elias's life tonight. You're skilled. Knowledgeable. You're worth 10 of those council members who wanted you dead. He paused. And you're brave. Walking into that room, knowing they all blamed you, knowing you might make things worse, that took courage. A faint blush colored Lyra's cheeks. I couldn't let him die. Not when I could help. Most people would have. Cale found himself studying her face in the lamplight, the soft curve of her jaw, the way her eyes reflected gold when she was thinking hard about something. She was beautiful. He'd noticed it before, but in an abstract way. Now, standing in the quiet of the cottage with her scent filling his lungs, it hit him like a physical force. His mate. His wolf rumbled with approval, pressing against his consciousness with an urgency that was becoming harder to ignore. Claim her properly. Mark her. Make sure every wolf knows she's ours. Cale shoved the instinct down. Lyra was barely starting to trust him. She didn't need him acting on primitive urges that would only scare her more. We should keep looking, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. There has to be something else here. Something that tells us who's really behind this. They searched for another hour. Kale went through Mara's papers while Lyra examined the bedroom and kitchen. They found nothing useful, just the normal detritus of a life. Bills. Letters from Mara's daughter. A journal that documented council meetings in meticulous detail but revealed nothing suspicious. It was Lyra who finally found it. Kale. Her voice was urgent. Come here. He found her in the kitchen, crouched in front of a cabinet beneath the sink. She'd pulled out all the cleaning supplies and was pointing at something scratched into the wooden back panel. Numbers. A date. And a name. Ashford. 3 weeks. Air protocol. Kale's blood ran cold. Air protocol. That's the succession ceremony, Lyra finished. When the Alpha officially names his heir and transfers part of his power. She looked up at him. It's scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Elias was supposed to receive the Alpha's mark and be recognized as the next leader. Kale repeated. Before he got sick. They stared at each other as the pieces began to click into place. Someone's trying to stop the succession, Lyra said slowly. They've been poisoning Elias, not to kill him, but to make him weak, unreliable, unfit to lead. And they've been poisoning the council members who support him, creating chaos and instability. So when the ceremony happens, there's doubt. Kale's mind raced through the implications. If Elias is seen as too weak, too compromised, the council can challenge the succession. Call for a different heir. Or no heir at all. Lyra stood, her expression grave. If the succession fails, the pact descends into chaos. Different factions fighting for control. And in that chaos, someone else takes power, Kale finished. The question was, who? They returned to Kale's quarters well after midnight. The pack house was quiet, but Kale could feel the tension humming through the walls. News of Mara's death had spread. Wolves were scared. Paranoid. Exactly what the traitor wanted. Lyra sank into the chair by the cold fireplace, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. We need to figure out who benefits from stopping the succession, she said. Who has the most to gain from Elias being discredited? The Alpha's nephew, Kale said immediately. Roman Ashford. He's next in line if Elias is passed over. But Roman is engaged to Mara's daughter. Lyra frowned. If he's behind this, why would he kill his future mother-in-law? Because she found out. Kale began to pace. Or because she was helping him and became a liability. Either way, Roman has motive. He's ambitious. Ruthless. And he's been vocal about his belief that Elias is too soft to lead. Can you prove it? Not yet. Kale's hands curled into fists. But I will. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then, Kale, what happens if we can't? What happens if we can't find proof before the 3 days are up? He stopped pacing, turned to face her. We will. But if we don't? Lyra. He moved to kneel in front of her chair, bringing them eye level. I won't let them hurt you. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what laws I have to break. You're my mate. That means something to me. Her eyes searched his face. Why? She whispered. Why does it mean something? You said yourself you never wanted a mate. That you thought it was a weakness. I did think that. Kale's throat tightened. For years, I watched wolves get soft. Watched them make stupid decisions because their mates asked them to. Watched them become vulnerable in ways that got them killed. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. That I'd stay hard. Controlled. Alone. And now? Now I realize I was lying to myself. The admission came out rough. Raw. The bond didn't make me weak, Lyra. It made me see clearly for the first time in my life. You're not a liability. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Lyra's breath caught. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then, slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her hand over his. The mate bond flared between them, not violent this time, but warm. Right. I'm scared, she whispered. Of this. Of you. Of what happens if we fail. I know. Cale turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore. We're in this together now. Together, Lyra repeated, like she was testing the word. I've never had someone fight for me before. Never had someone who, she trailed off, but Cale heard what she didn't say. Never had someone who cared. You have me now, he said quietly. For whatever that's worth. Lyra's smile was small but genuine. It's worth more than you know. They sat like that for a while, hands intertwined, the silence between them comfortable in a way Cale had never experienced before. His wolf was content, not pushing, not demanding, just peaceful. Like this was exactly where they were meant to be. Finally, Lyra spoke again. So what's our next move? We watch Roman, Cale said. Closely. If he's behind this, he'll make a mistake. Especially now that Mara's dead and Elias is recovering. He'll be feeling pressured. Desperate. And desperate people do stupid things, Lyra finished. Exactly. There's something else we should consider. Lyra's expression turned thoughtful. The message carved in Mara's cabinet mentioned air protocol. But it didn't specify which air. What if there's more to this than just stopping Elias? Cale frowned. What do you mean? I mean, what if the goal isn't just to discredit Elias? What if someone's planning something bigger? Something that happens during the actual ceremony? The thought sent ice through Cale's veins. The succession ceremony was a sacred ritual, one that required the Alpha to be vulnerable, to open his power to his heir in front of the entire pack. If someone wanted to strike at Gregor himself, we need to talk to the Alpha, he said abruptly. Tell him what we've found. Warn him that the ceremony might be compromised. Will he listen? Lyra's voice was doubtful. He still thinks I might be guilty. And you've defied him by claiming me. He might not trust either of us. She had a point. But they were running out of options. And time. Dawn was breaking when someone pounded on Cale's door. He was on his feet instantly, blade in hand, body positioned between the door and Lyra. She'd fallen asleep in the chair a few hours earlier, and he'd covered her with a blanket rather than wake her. Now she stirred, blinking in confusion. Cale Blackthorn. The voice on the other side was young. Frightened. The Alpha demands your presence. Immediately. There's been another attack. Cale's blood ran cold. Who? The Alpha's nephew. Roman Ashford. Someone tried to poison him. He's alive, but barely. Cale and Lyra exchanged glances. Another poisoning. But this time, the target was the wolf they suspected. Either they'd been wrong about Roman, or someone was eliminating anyone who might challenge them for power. The game had just gotten deadlier. Roman Ashford lay in his quarters, surrounded by healers and guards. He looked worse than Elias had, his skin gray, his breathing labored, his body racked with tremors. Alpha Gregor stood over him, his expression murderous. Who did this? He demanded as Cale and Lyra entered. Who's attacking my family? That's what we're trying to find out. Cale moved to Roman's bedside. The young wolf's eyes were barely open, unfocused with pain and fever. What happened? Breakfast, Roman managed. His voice was a rasp. Tea. Tasted wrong. But I'd already swallowed. The same poison used on Elias and Mara, Lyra said quietly. She was examining the teacup on the nearby table, sniffing carefully. Belladonna. A massive dose. Whoever did this wasn't being subtle anymore. They wanted him dead. Can you save him? Gregor's voice was desperate. Maybe. Lyra was already pulling supplies from her bag. But I'll need the same treatment I used on Elias. And I'll need everyone to leave. Now. I can't work with people crowding me. The Alpha hesitated. Then he nodded. Everyone out. Blackthorn, you stay. Guard her. The room emptied until it was just the four of them, Cale, Lyra, the unconscious Roman, and the Alpha who stood in the corner watching with haunted eyes. Lyra worked with the same calm efficiency she'd shown with Elias. Cale assisted where he could, holding Roman down when the convulsions started, following Lyra's instructions without question. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. Slowly, Roman's color began to improve. His breathing steadied. And finally, his eyes opened fully. "Thank you," he whispered to Lyra. "You saved my life." "Rest," Lyra said gently. "You're not out of danger yet." But Roman's hand shot out, grabbing Kale's wrist with surprising strength. "Kale, I need to tell you." "What?" Kale leaned closer. "Mara." Roman's voice was urgent. "The night she died, I saw someone leaving her cottage. I didn't realize." "Who?" Kale's grip tightened. "Roman, who did you see?" Roman's eyes started to close. The drugs Lyra had given him were pulling him under. But he managed one more word. "Alara." Then he was unconscious. Kale turned to stare at Lyra, his mind reeling. Alara. Mara's daughter. Roman's fiancée. The one person no one had suspected. Wait. Alara. The quiet daughter. Drop your reactions below because I did not see that coming. And if your mind is blown, hit that subscribe button. The world tilted. Kale stood frozen in Roman's quarters, his mind racing through every interaction, every conversation, every detail he'd overlooked. Alara Voss. Mara's daughter. The quiet, unremarkable wolf who'd been engaged to Roman for 6 months. Who'd faded into the background at every council meeting, every pack gathering. Who'd been so invisible that no one had thought to suspect her. "It can't be," Gregor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Alara she's just a girl. Barely 20. She doesn't have the knowledge to." "She's been sick for months," Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp with sudden understanding. "Her mother brought her to me repeatedly. Headaches, nausea, fatigue." She turned to Kale, her eyes wide. "I thought she was being poisoned. But what if she was testing the poison on herself? Building up tolerance. Learning exactly how much to use, how long the symptoms would last, what the progression looked like. Using her own body as a laboratory," Kale said slowly. The pieces were clicking together with horrible clarity. Her mother requisitioned the nightshade for her. Probably thought she was treating Alara's illness, never realizing that her daughter was the one making herself sick. Lyra's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. And when Mara finally figured it out, Alara killed her. Her own mother. The room fell silent except for Roman's labored breathing. "Why?" Gregor's voice was raw. "Why would she do this?" Roman was going to marry her. She would have had position, security, a place in the pack hierarchy. She didn't want a place, Kale said. She wanted power. Real power. He turned to face the Alpha. "Think about it. If Elias is discredited and can't take the succession, who's next in line?" "Roman." "And who would rule beside Roman as his mate?" Understanding dawned in Gregor's eyes. "Alara." "But she couldn't just wait for Roman to inherit naturally," Lyra added. "That could take years. Decades." So she created a crisis. Poisoned Elias to make him seem weak. Poisoned the council members who supported him to create chaos. Framed me to make everyone paranoid and suspicious. Her voice grew harder. And then, when the succession was in doubt, she would have made her move. By poisoning Roman too, Kale finished. Making it look like someone was targeting the entire Ashford bloodline. Creating enough chaos that the council would have to call for new leadership entirely. And in that chaos, who would they turn to? Gregor's expression was thunderous. Someone stable. Someone who'd been quietly competent in the background. Someone who seemed to have everyone's best interests at heart. Alara. Kale's jaw tightened. She would position herself as the voice of reason. The one who could unite the fractured pack. And with Roman poisoned, recovering, dependent on her care. She'd control him completely, Lyra whispered. He'd be alpha in name only. She'd be the real power. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. A lowborn wolf with no rank, no title, orchestrating a conspiracy that would topple the pack's entire leadership structure. Using her perceived weakness, her invisibility, as a weapon. "Where is she?" Kale demanded. Where's Alara right now? Gregor's face went pale. I don't know. After Mara died, she said she needed time alone to grieve. I gave her leave to, he stopped. The succession ceremony. She volunteered to help with the preparations. She's been in the ceremonial chamber for the past 2 days, organizing the ritual components. Alone. Kale was already moving toward the door. Unsupervised? With access to everything needed for the ceremony. She was grieving, Gregor started. She was planning, Kale snarled. Whatever her endgame is, it's happening at the ceremony. We need to get to that chamber. Now. But Lyra grabbed his arm, holding him back. Wait. If we confront her without proof, she'll just deny everything. She's been careful. Methodical. She won't have left evidence lying around. We don't have time for proof, Kale growled. His wolf was howling for action, for violence, for justice. 3 people have been poisoned. 1 is dead. If we wait, then we play into her hands. Lyra's voice was steady, but Kale could see the fear in her eyes. She's been ahead of us this entire time, Kale. She knew we'd eventually figure out Mara was involved. That's why she killed her. She's planned for every contingency. She glanced at Roman's unconscious form. Except this one. She didn't expect Roman to survive. Didn't expect him to see her that night. So we have surprise on our side, Kale said. For once. Then let's use it wisely. Lyra turned to Alpha Gregor. The ceremony is in 3 days. That's when she'll make her final move. Whatever she's planning, it requires the ritual. The vulnerability it creates. So we let her think she's won. We don't change anything. And we set a trap. Gregor stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You want to use my son as bait. I want to catch a traitor before she destroys your pack, Lyra said evenly. And yes, that means letting the ceremony proceed as planned. But with precautions. Safeguards. She looked at Kale. Can you protect Elias during the ritual? With my life, Kale said without hesitation. Then we have a chance. Lyra's expression was fierce. But we need to be smart. Careful. If Alara suspects we know, she'll run. Or worse, she'll accelerate whatever she's planning. So we act normal, Kale said slowly. We pretend we're still investigating. Still chasing dead ends. And we watch her, Lyra finished. Every move. Every breath. Until she reveals her hand. Gregor was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it. But Blackthorn, if anything happens to my son. It won't, Kale said. I promise you that. They left Roman under heavy guard and returned to Kale's quarters as false dawn colored the sky. Lyra was shaking, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline. The realization of how close they'd come to losing everything. She's been watching me, Lyra said suddenly. She stood by the window, staring out at the waking pack. This whole time. She probably chose me specifically because I was the perfect scapegoat. Low ranking. No allies. Easy to frame. Her hands clenched into fists. She used me. Used my work, my reputation, everything I'd built. Turned it into a weapon. Kale moved to stand behind her. Not touching, he could sense she needed space, but close enough to offer comfort if she wanted it. She underestimated you. Did she? Lyra's laugh was bitter. I would have died on that punishment circle if not for the mate bond. If you hadn't claimed me, I'd be dead in the wilds right now, and she'd have gotten away with everything. But I did claim you. Kale's voice was quiet. The moon chose you as my mate for a reason. Maybe this was it. Maybe you were always meant to be the one to expose her. Lyra turned to face him, her green eyes searching his. Do you really believe that? That the moon has a plan for all of this? I don't know what I believe anymore. Kale reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. She didn't flinch. Didn't retreat. Just leaned into his touch like she was starving for it. But I believe in you. In your strength. Your courage. The way you saved 2 lives tonight when you could have let them die. When anyone would have understood if you had. I couldn't, Lyra whispered. I'm a healer. It's who I am. Even when they've hurt me, Even when they wanted me dead, I can't just let someone suffer when I have the power to stop it. I know. Kale's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. That's what makes you better than all of them. Better than me. You're not, Lyra started, but Kale shook his head. I am. I've done terrible things, Lyra. As an enforcer, I've hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. Followed orders without question because it was easier than thinking too hard about whether those orders were right. His voice roughened. I'm not a good wolf. But you make me want to be. Lyra's breath caught. Kale. When the bond snapped into place, he continued, my first thought was that it was a mistake. That the moon had gotten it wrong. Because someone like you deserved better than someone like me. He swallowed hard. But then I watched you save Elias. Watched you walk into danger without hesitation. Watched you figure out a conspiracy that I missed completely. And I realized something. What? Lyra's voice was barely audible. That maybe I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you anyway. The silence that followed was charged with something Kale couldn't name. Lyra stared up at him with an expression caught somewhere between tears and wonder. Then, slowly, deliberately, she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative. Nothing like the violent claiming of the mate bond. This was a choice, her choice, to accept him, to trust him, to want him. Kale's arms came around her carefully, holding her like she was something precious. Breakable. His wolf was howling with triumph, but Kale kept iron control over his instincts. This had to be her pace, her decision. When she finally pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. I don't think you're a bad wolf, she said quietly. I think you're a wolf who's been forced to do bad things. There's a difference. Her hand came up to rest over his heart. And I see who you really are. Under all the scars and the hardness. I see you, Kale. Something in Kale's chest cracked open. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent. We're going to stop her, he said roughly. Alara. We're going to protect your pack and make sure she never hurts anyone again. Our pack, Lyra corrected softly. It's our pack now. We're in this together, remember. Together, Kale repeated. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun rose over the packlands. For the first time since the bond had snapped into place, Kale felt settled. Like something that had been broken inside him had finally started to heal. His mate. His partner. His equal. Whatever came next, they'd face it side by side. The next 2 days passed in a blur of careful preparation. Kale coordinated with Dane and the other enforcers, positioning them strategically around the ceremonial chamber. Lyra worked with the pack healers, preparing antidotes and treatments for every poison Alara might use. And Alpha Gregor played his part perfectly, acting like nothing was wrong, like the ceremony would proceed exactly as planned. Alara remained invisible. Helpful. She organized the ritual components with quiet efficiency, accepting condolences for her mother's death with appropriate grief, checking on Roman's recovery with tender concern. She was perfect. Too perfect. Kale watched her from the shadows, memorizing every movement, every expression, looking for the crack in her mask. But Alara never slipped. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a grieving daughter, a devoted fiancée, a loyal pack member, which made her infinitely more dangerous. She knows, Lyra said on the second night. They were back in Kale's quarters, going over the plan for the 100th time. She has to know we suspect her. She's too smart not to notice the extra guards, the way people are watching her. If she knows, she's not showing it, Kale said. But unease coiled in his gut. Lyra was right. Alara was too calm, too composed. Like she'd planned for this too. What if we're wrong? Lyra's voice was small. What if she's not planning anything at the ceremony? What if we've missed something and she's going to strike somewhere else entirely? Then we adapt. Kale moved to sit beside her. But I don't think we're wrong. Everything points to the ceremony. The timing, the symbolism. Whatever her endgame is, it requires the ritual. The vulnerability it creates, Lyra murmured, repeating her words from 2 days ago. When the Alpha opens his power to his heir, he's defenseless. Exposed. If someone wanted to kill him, they'd never have a better opportunity, Cale finished grimly. They sat in silence, the weight of what was coming pressing down on them. Cale. Lyra's voice was hesitant. If something goes wrong tomorrow, if I don't. His voice was sharp. Don't talk like that. But if I do, she turned to face him, her expression serious. I need you to know that I don't regret this. Any of it. Meeting you. The mate bond. Even everything that's happened. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I matter. Like I'm not just disposable. Cale's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You are not disposable. You have never been disposable. And nothing is going to happen to you tomorrow. I won't allow it. You can't promise that. Watch me. Cale kissed her, hard and fierce and claiming. You're mine, Lyra Vale. My mate. My partner. And I protect what's mine. With everything I am. Lyra kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a few precious moments the world narrowed to just the two of them. No conspiracy. No danger. Just the mate bond humming between them, warm and right and perfect. When they finally broke apart, Lyra was smiling. Together, she said. Together, Cale agreed. The day of the succession ceremony dawned clear and cold. The entire pack gathered in the great clearing, hundreds of wolves arranged in concentric circles around the ceremonial chamber. The air hummed with anticipation and tension. Everyone knew something was wrong, the extra guards, the whispered rumors, the way the Alpha's eyes were sharp and watchful. But the ritual would proceed. It had to. Cale stood at Elias's right hand, his senses on high alert. Dane was positioned at the chamber's entrance. Other enforcers lined the perimeter, disguised as honor guards. Lyra waited near the Alpha, her healer's bag ready, her expression calm despite the fear Cale could smell rolling off her. And Alara. Alara knelt in the front row beside Roman, her head bowed, her posture perfect. Waiting. Alpha Gregor began the ritual words, his voice carrying across the clearing. Ancient phrases in the old language, calling on the moon's blessing, calling on the goddess to witness the transfer of power. Elias stepped forward, baring his throat in the traditional gesture of submission and trust. And Gregor raised his hand, claws extended, preparing to mark his son with the Alpha's brand. A scream shattered the ceremony. Not from the chamber. From the pack house. Fire, someone shouted. The Alpha's quarters are on fire. Chaos erupted. Wolves scattered, running toward the smoke that was beginning to pour from the pack house's upper windows. The guards broke formation. The ceremony dissolved into panic. And in the confusion, Cale saw Alara move. Not toward the fire. Not toward safety. Toward Elias. Her hand was in her pocket, pulling out a vial. No! Cale lunged, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. His body slammed into Alara's, knocking her away from Elias. The vial flew from her hand, shattering on the stone ground. Alara rolled to her feet with a grace that belied her gentle appearance. Her face was no longer soft, no longer grieving. Her expression was cold, calculating, triumphant. Too late, enforcer, she said softly. It's already done. Cale's blood turned to ice. What have you done? Alara smiled. Look at the Alpha. Cale spun. Gregor was on his knees, his hand pressed to his chest, his face twisted in agony. The ceremonial claws he'd extended, the ones meant to mark Elias, were coated in something dark. Something that was burning through his skin. Poison. On the ritual claws. Alara had poisoned the Alpha with his own ceremonial weapon. And as Gregor collapsed, as the pack erupted into screams of horror, Alara's voice rang out clear and strong. The Alpha has fallen. The bloodline is compromised. By pack law, I invoke the right of challenge. Her eyes glowed gold as her wolf rose to the surface. I claim the throne. Time fractured. Kale watched Alpha Gregor collapse, watched Alara's triumphant smile, watched the pack descend into chaos, and his mind went cold and clear. The same icy clarity that had made him the Alpha's best enforcer. The ability to shut down emotion and act. Lyra. His voice cut through the screaming. The Alpha now. Lyra was already moving, her healer's instincts overriding everything else. She dropped to her knees beside Gregor, her hands going to his chest, assessing the damage. The poison was spreading fast, darker than anything they'd seen before. More concentrated. More lethal. I need atropine, she said urgently. And silver root, it counteracts. You need to step back, Alara's voice rang out. She stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, and power radiated from her in waves. Not alpha power, she didn't have that yet. But the force of absolute conviction. The Alpha has fallen. Pack law is clear. In the absence of a viable heir, any wolf of sufficient strength may challenge for leadership. Elias is right here. Dane snarled, moving to flank the young heir. The succession isn't complete, but he's still the rightful. He's poisoned. Alara's voice was cold. Factual. Weakened. Everyone knows it. He barely survived the last attack. And now his father lies dying from the very ritual meant to pass him power. She turned to address the pack, her voice rising. Is this the leadership you want? A bloodline so compromised, so weak, that they can't even complete their own ceremony without catastrophe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Frightened. Uncertain. Alara was good. She'd planned this perfectly. The fire was still burning in the pack house, creating panic and confusion. Gregor was dying. Elias looked young and scared beside his fallen father. And Alara looked strong. Composed. Like the eye of the storm. She poisoned them. Lyra's voice shook with fury. She'd abandoned trying to save Gregor. The poison was too advanced, spreading too fast, and now she stood, her small frame radiating rage. She's the one who made Elias sick. Who killed her own mother? Who's been orchestrating all of this? Prove it. Alara's smile was cold. You're an accused traitor, Omega. Your mate is an enforcer who broke protocol to claim you. Why should anyone believe a word you say? Because Roman saw you, Kale said. His hand was on his blade, his body coiled and ready. The night you killed Mara. He saw you leaving her cottage. Did he? Alara's expression didn't change. Roman was delirious when he said that. Poisoned. Hallucinating. He's already recanted, actually. Said he was confused. That the fever made him see things that weren't there. Kale's stomach dropped. She'd gotten to Roman. Convinced him or threatened him or made him doubt what he'd seen. Another contingency planned for. The ceremonial clause, Lyra said desperately. Test them. The poison will still be there. The clause that the Alpha himself prepared? Alara raised an eyebrow. The ones that only he had access to? That only he handled before the ceremony. She let that sink in. If there's poison on them, it's because Gregor put it there himself. Perhaps the strain of leadership finally broke him. Perhaps he couldn't bear the thought of passing his failing power to a weak heir. That's insane, Dane growled. Is it? Alara's voice was reasonable. Persuasive. Look at the evidence. A bloodline falling apart. A son who can barely stand without help. A father desperate enough to poison himself rather than watch his legacy crumble. She spread her hands. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying we don't know what happened. And in that uncertainty, the pack needs strength. Stability. Leadership that isn't compromised. She was turning it around. Making herself the voice of reason. Making Gregor look unstable. Making Elias look weak. And the pack was listening. Kale could see it in their faces. The doubt. The fear. They'd been through weeks of chaos and poisoning and death. They wanted someone to blame. Someone to follow. Alara was offering them both. I invoke the right of challenge, Alara repeated. Any who wish to deny my claim may face me in the circle. Single combat. The winner takes the Alpha's throne. The silence that followed was deafening. Elias stepped forward. I'll fight you. No, Gregor's voice was a rasp. He was still alive barely. Lyra had managed to slow the poison, but his skin was gray, his breathing labored. Elias, you're not strong enough. She'll kill you. I'm the heir, Elias said quietly. It's my right. And you'll die exercising it. Gregor's eyes found Cale. Blackthorn. As my enforcer. I name you my champion. You'll fight in Elias's place. The pack erupted into chaos again. Wolves shouting, arguing, some supporting the decision, others claiming it violated tradition. But Alara just smiled. Perfect, she said softly. The enforcer who broke protocol to claim a traitor. The wolf who's already compromised his loyalty. She met Cale's eyes across the circle. This will be easier than I thought. Cale stepped into the circle. His wolf was snarling, ready for blood. But his human mind stayed cold. Calculating. Alara was fast. He'd seen her move when she'd tried to poison Elias. And she was smart, too smart to challenge for the throne if she wasn't confident she could win the fight. She had a plan. She always had a plan. Cale, don't. Lyra's hand caught his arm. Her eyes were wide with fear. She's going to cheat. She's going to do something. I know. Cale pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. The mate bond hummed between them, and for just a moment, he let himself feel it. The connection. The rightness. But I don't have a choice. If I don't fight, she wins by default. Then I'm staying here. Lyra's voice was fierce. Right at the edge of the circle. Watching. If she tries anything. You call it out. Cale kissed her, hard and fast. I love you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. He hadn't meant to say them. Not now. Not like this. But Lyra's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, she whispered. So you'd better not die, Cale Blackthorn. Because I just found you, and I'm not letting you go. Cale forced himself to step away. To turn back to the circle. To face the wolf who'd orchestrated all of this. Alara was already shifting. Her bones cracked and reformed, her body expanding into her wolf form. She was larger than Cale expected, nearly as big as he was. Her fur was dark silver, her eyes cold and calculating even in wolf form. Cale shifted too. His wolf surged forward with relief, finally allowed to act. To fight. To protect. They circled each other in the ceremonial ring. The pack had gone silent, watching with collective breath held. This wasn't just a challenge fight. This was the future of the pack. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. Alara struck first. She was fast, faster than any wolf Cale had fought before. Her teeth snapped for his throat, and he barely dodged in time. He countered with a strike to her flank, but she twisted away, her claws raking across his shoulder. First blood to her. The pack murmured. They fought in a blur of fur and fangs. Alara was good, well-trained, strategic, always 3 moves ahead. But Cale was better. He'd been fighting since he was old enough to shift. He'd survived battles that should have killed him. He was the Alpha's enforcer for a reason. He caught Alara's throat in his jaws and bit down. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to end the fight. Alara went limp in his grip. Submitting. Cale released her, stepping back. It was over. He'd won. Alara's challenge had failed. Pain exploded through his hind leg. Cale yelped, stumbling, and looked down to see a small dart embedded in his muscle. Poison. The same poison that had been on the ceremonial claws. He could feel it burning through his system already. He spun, looking for the source, and saw Roman standing at the edge of the circle, a blowgun in his hands, his expression blank. I'm sorry, Roman said quietly, but she has my sister. If I don't help her, Alara kills Mira. I don't have a choice. The world tilted. Cale tried to shift back to human form, but his body wouldn't respond. The poison was spreading too fast, shutting down his systems, making his legs buckle. He collapsed. Lyra screamed. And Alara shifted back to human form, standing over him with a triumphant smile. "The enforcer falls," she announced. "The challenge is mine. By pack law, I claim." "No." The voice was small, but it carried. Lyra stepped into the circle. "I challenge you," she said. Her voice shook, but her eyes were fierce. "For my mate. For the pack. For everyone you've hurt." Alara laughed. "You? An Omega? You can't even shift properly. You die in seconds. Then you should have no problem accepting." Lyra's hands were clenched into fists. "Or are you afraid?" The pack was murmuring now. Louder. Because Alara had just claimed that strength should rule. That the weak should step aside. If she refused to fight an Omega, she'd look like a coward. Alara's eyes narrowed. "Fine. But when I kill you, your mate dies too. Slowly. I'll make him watch while the poison eats through his system." "You'll have to beat me first," Lyra said. She didn't shift. She couldn't. Omega wolves were too small, too weak in wolf form. Instead, she stood there in human form, facing down a trained fighter who'd orchestrated a conspiracy that had brought down an alpha. Kale tried to move, tried to stop her, but his body wouldn't respond. The poison had paralyzed him. All he could do was watch as Alara shifted back into her wolf form and lunged at his mate. Lyra didn't run. She'd spent weeks learning Alara's poisons, learning how they worked, how they spread, how they killed. And she'd spent the last 2 days preparing. As Alara's jaws closed around her throat, Lyra jammed a syringe into the wolf's neck. Pure nightshade extract. The highest concentration possible. Enough to drop a full-grown alpha in seconds. Alara's eyes went wide. She stumbled back, releasing Lyra, her body already starting to convulse. Lyra collapsed, blood streaming from the wounds on her throat. But she was smiling. "I'm a healer," she gasped. "But I know poisons too." Alara shifted back to human form, clutching her neck, foam flecking her lips. You can't." "I just did." Lyra's voice was fading. "For everyone you hurt. For everyone you tried to destroy." Alara fell. And didn't get back up. The pack stood in stunned silence. Then Dane's voice rang out, "Get healers." "No. The Enforcer and the Omega, they're both poisoned." The world dissolved into chaos. Kale felt hands on him, felt his body being moved. He tried to speak, tried to find Lyra, but his vision was going dark. The last thing he saw was Lyra's face, pale and blood-stained, her eyes finding his across the distance. "I love you," he tried to say. But the darkness swallowed him before the words could form. Kale woke to pain. Not the sharp, immediate agony of injury. He'd experienced that enough to recognize it. This was different. A deep, bone-level ache that radiated through every nerve, like his body was remembering trauma it had survived. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. His muscles screamed in protest. "Don't." A familiar voice. Dane's. "You're still healing. The poison nearly killed you, you stubborn bastard." Kale forced his eyes open. He was in the pack's healing ward, surrounded by the smell of herbs and antiseptic. Dane sat in a chair beside his bed, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was rough with several days' growth of beard. "How long?" Kale's voice came out as a rasp. 3 days. Dane leaned forward. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your wolf fought the poison hard, but it was a close thing. If Lyra hadn't already prepared antidotes, if she hadn't taught the healers exactly what to do," he stopped. "She saved your life, Kale." Again. Lyra. Kale tried to sit up, panic flooding through him. "Where is she? Is she alive?" Dane's hand pressed him back down. "Barely, but alive. She's in the next room, still unconscious. Her wounds were worse than yours," Alara tore through her throat. "She lost a lot of blood. And the nightshade she used on Alara poisoned her too. Some of it got into her system through the wounds. Kale's heart felt like it was being crushed. I need to see her. You can barely move. I don't care. Kale swung his legs over the side of the bed. The world tilted dangerously, and his vision grayed at the edges, but he forced himself to stand. Take me to her. Now. Dane sighed, but didn't argue. He supported Kale's weight as they made their way slowly down the hall. Each step sent pain lancing through Kale's body, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. Lyra's room was quieter than his. Softer. Someone had brought flowers, wildflowers from the forest, arranged in rough clay pots. The entire pack's gratitude, Kale realized, for the Omega who'd saved them all. She lay in the bed, so small and pale she looked like a ghost. Bandages wrapped her throat and shoulder. Her breathing was shallow but steady. And beside her bed, keeping vigil, sat Alpha Gregor. The Alpha looked up as Kale entered. He was thinner than he'd been 3 days ago, his face drawn with pain and exhaustion. But he was alive. Recovering. Blackthorn, he said quietly. You should be resting. So should you. Kale moved to Lyra's other side, his hand finding hers. Her skin was cold. Too cold. How is she? Fighting. Gregor's voice held something Kale had never heard from him before, respect. She's been fighting since they brought her in. The healers say her wolf is strong. Stronger than any Omega they've seen. She's not giving up. She never does. Kale's thumb brushed across Lyra's knuckles. The mate bond was still there, humming faintly between them. Weaker than before, strained by injury and poison, but there. Alive. Did Alara. Dead. Gregor's voice was flat. The nightshade stopped her heart within minutes. Roman confessed everything once she was gone. She'd been blackmailing him, threatened to kill his sister if he didn't help her. He's the one who planted the poison in your leg during the challenge. The Alpha's jaw tightened. He's been stripped of his title. Exiled. The pack wanted him executed, but he glanced at Lyra. She'd already punished the real guilty party. Roman was just a tool. Kale said nothing. Part of him wanted Roman dead. But the larger part, the part that Lyra had awakened, understood. Understood what it was like to be trapped. To make impossible choices. To do terrible things for people you loved. The fire, he asked. Set by one of Alara's allies. Another wolf she'd been blackmailing. We've rooted out the whole conspiracy. Gregor stood slowly, wincing. It's over, Blackthorn. Your mate saved us all. An Omega no one believed in, no one defended, stopped a coup that would have destroyed this pack. She's not just an Omega, Kale said quietly. She's the strongest wolf I know. I'm beginning to understand that. Gregor moved toward the door, then paused. When she wakes, and she will wake, she'll have a place of honor in this pack. A seat on the council if she wants it. Full status. Whatever she needs. He met Kale's eyes. I was wrong about her. About you. About what the mate bond means. I won't make that mistake again. After he left, Kale was alone with Lyra. He pulled a chair close to her bed and settled into it, ignoring his body's protests. He wasn't leaving. Not until she opened her eyes. You have to wake up, he said softly. You have to come back to me, Lyra. Because I can't do this without you. I don't want to do this without you. His voice cracked. You told me not to die, remember? Well, I'm telling you the same thing. Don't you dare leave me now. Not after everything we've been through. The mate bond pulsed faintly. Like an answer. Kale held her hand and waited. Hours passed. The sun set. Rose again. Healers came and went, checking Lyra's vitals, changing her bandages, administering medicines. Kale stayed. Dane brought him food he barely touched. Other wolves came to pay respects. Elias, recovered now and looking stronger, pack members who'd once called for Lyra's execution, now bringing gifts and apologies. Kale turned them all away. Lyra needed rest. Quiet. Peace. On the evening of the 4th day, her fingers twitched in his. Kale's head snapped up. Lyra? Her eyelids fluttered. Opened slowly. Those forest green eyes found his, unfocused at first, then clearing. Kale. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse and injury. I'm here. Relief crashed through him so violently his hands shook. I'm right here. You're safe. You're going to be okay. Alara. Lyra tried to sit up and immediately gasped in pain. Don't move. Kale gently pressed her back down. Alara's dead. The conspiracy is over. You won, Lyra. You saved everyone. Tears welled in her eyes. You were poisoned. I saw you fall. I thought. I'm fine. Kale brushed the tears away with his thumb. Thanks to you. You prepared the antidotes. Taught the healers what to do. You saved my life. Again. We saved each other. Lyra's hand tightened in his. That's what mates do, right? We protect each other. Right. Kale leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, careful of her injuries. But maybe next time we could protect each other without nearly dying? I'd prefer that. Lyra laughed weakly. I'll try to remember that. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together, alive together. The mate bond strengthened with every passing second, knitting them back together. Finally, Lyra spoke again. What happens now? Now you recover. Kale's voice was firm. The pack owes you everything. Gregor's offered you a council seat. Full honors. Whatever you want. I don't want a council seat. Lyra's expression was thoughtful. I want to keep healing. Keep helping people. But, she looked up at him. I want to do it as your mate. Officially. No more hiding. No more fear. You want a mating ceremony? Kale's wolf rumbled with approval. I want everyone to know you're mine. Lyra's smile was soft but fierce. And that I'm yours. Is that okay? More than okay. Kale kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring everything he felt into it. Relief. Love. Gratitude. I'll give you the biggest ceremony this pack has ever seen. I don't need big. Lyra's fingers tangled in his hair. I just need you. You have me, Kale promised. For the rest of our lives. However long that is. Whatever comes next. You have all of me, Lyra. Then that's enough, she whispered. 2 weeks later, Lyra was cleared by the healers. Her throat had healed, though she'd carry scars, thin silver lines that Kale thought made her look even more beautiful. Battle scars. Proof of her courage. She'd refused the council seat, but accepted a position as head healer, with full authority over the pack's medical practices. She'd also insisted on teaching other wolves her skills, democratizing knowledge that had once been hoarded by a few families. The pack was changing. Opening. Becoming something better than it had been. And at the center of that change stood Lyra and Kale. Their mating ceremony was scheduled for the full moon. Nothing elaborate, just the traditional ritual, witnessed by the pack, blessed by the moon. Lyra wore a simple white dress that Kale thought made her look like moonlight given form. He wore the formal leathers of an enforcer, though his role was changing too. Gregor had offered him the position of Beta, second in command. Kale had accepted, but only if Lyra could serve beside him. The Alpha had agreed without hesitation. They stood in the ceremonial circle, the same circle where Alara had challenged, where Lyra had fought for both their lives, and Kale thought about how much had changed. How close they'd come to losing everything. And how worth it all of it had been. Do you, Kale Blackthorn, take this wolf as your mate? The ceremony leader intoned. To protect and cherish, to honor and defend, for as long as the moon lights the sky? I do, Kale said clearly. With everything I am. And do you, Lyra Vale, take this wolf as your mate? To protect and cherish, to honor and defend, for as long as the moon lights the sky. Lyra's eyes shone with tears. Happy tears this time. I do. With everything I am. Then by the power of the moon and the witness of this pack, I declare you mated. The ceremony leader smiled. You may seal the bond. Kale pulled Lyra close and kissed her as the pack erupted in howls of celebration. The mate bond flared between them, complete now, unbreakable. Two souls recognizing each other. Choosing each other. Forever. When they finally broke apart, Lyra was laughing. "We did it," she said. "We actually survived." "We did more than survive." Kale tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We changed everything." "You changed everything." "We changed everything," Lyra corrected. "Together." "Together," Kale agreed. And as the moon rose full and bright above them, as the pack celebrated around them, Kale held his mate and thought about the future. About the life they'd build. The challenges they'd face. The love that would carry them through it all. He'd been sent to punish her. Instead, he'd claimed her. And she'd claimed him right back. It was the best mistake he'd ever made. I'm crying happy tears. They made it. They're together. Drop a heart emoji if you love this journey. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because we have so many more stories coming your way. 3 months after the mating ceremony, Lyra stood in her new healing clinic and marveled at how much had changed. The clinic was larger than her old cabin, bright and clean, with separate rooms for treatment, storage, and teaching. Windows lined the walls, letting in sunlight that made the dried herbs hanging from the ceiling glow like captured summer. Pack members came and went freely now, no longer hesitant to seek her help. No longer whispering about the Omega who'd been accused of treason. Now they whispered about the Omega who'd saved them all. Lyra was training 3 new healers, young wolves eager to learn, treating her with a respect that still felt strange. She was teaching them not just herb lore but critical thinking. How to question. How to investigate. How to see patterns that others missed. How to be more than just what the pack expected them to be. "You're smiling again," Kale's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Even after 3 months, the mate bond still sent shivers through her every time he looked at her like that. Like she was everything. "I'm happy," Lyra said simply. "Is that allowed?" "More than allowed." Kale crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Mandatory, actually. I've decided it's my life's mission to keep you smiling." "Your life's mission is to be Beta," Lyra teased. "Or have you forgotten? That's my job. You're my mission." Kale kissed her softly. "There's a difference." Lyra melted into him, breathing in his scent, pine and earth and home. 3 months, and it still felt new. Still felt like a gift she hadn't quite earned. "I have news," Kale said after a moment. "Gregor wants to meet with us. Both of us. He says it's important." Lyra pulled back slightly. "Is something wrong?" "I don't think so." He seemed excited, actually. Kale's expression was puzzled. Which is strange for Gregor. The man doesn't do excited. They found the alpha in his private study, looking healthier than he had in months. The poison had left its mark, silver streaks in his hair that hadn't been there before, a slight tremor in his hands, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Lyra. Kale." He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Thank you for coming." "Of course, Alpha." Lyra settled into her seat, Kale's presence solid beside her. The mate bond hummed with curiosity and slight apprehension. Gregor studied them for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "I've been thinking about what you said, Lyra. About democratizing knowledge. About changing how this pack operates." "Oh." Lyra's voice was cautious. "You were right." Gregor leaned back. "For too long, we've been rigid. Hierarchical. We've treated Omegas as disposable, enforcers as weapons, and power as something to be hoarded rather than shared." He paused. "Ilara's conspiracy exposed every weakness in our system. The prejudices. The blind spots. The way we discount wolves based on their rank rather than their abilities. Change takes time," Kale said carefully. "It does. But it also takes commitment." Gregor pulled out a document, thick, official-looking. "I've been working with the council on reforms. New laws. New structures." He slid the document across the desk. "I want you both to review this. Tell me what I'm missing. What needs to be stronger." Lyra picked up the document with trembling hands. The title made her breath catch. Pack Reform Act, equality in rank, merit in leadership. She scanned the contents. Protections for Omegas. Requirements for evidence in accusations. Limits on enforcer authority. Mandatory training and critical thinking for all pack members. A grievance system that couldn't be dismissed by rank alone. It was everything she dreamed of but never thought possible. She looked up, tears stinging her eyes. Alpha, this is incredible. It's necessary. Gregor's voice was firm. We nearly lost everything because we were too blind to see the truth. Too invested in maintaining a hierarchy that put power over justice. His eyes found Lyra's. You saw what no one else could see. Not because you were smarter, though you are, but because you weren't blinded by rank and privilege. You questioned. You investigated. You refused to accept easy answers. I was just trying to survive, Lyra said quietly. You were doing more than that. Gregor stood, moving around the desk. You were showing us what we could be. What we should be. He extended his hand. I'm asking you to help me make these reforms real. To serve not just as head healer, but as an advisor on pack culture. To help us rebuild from the ground up. Lyra stared at his hand. 3 months ago, this man had wanted her dead. Had stood by while she was chained and dragged to the punishment circle. Had been ready to let his enforcer destroy her. And now he was asking for her help. The old Lyra, the one who'd learned to make herself small, to accept her place, to never question, would have refused. Would have said she wasn't worthy. Wasn't qualified. But she wasn't that Lyra anymore. She took his hand. I'll help. On one condition. Gregor raised an eyebrow. Which is, no more secrets. No more closed-door decisions. If we're going to reform this pack, we do it transparently. Everyone gets a voice. Even the Omegas. Even the lowest-ranked wolves. Lyra's voice grew stronger. Especially them. A slow smile spread across Gregor's face. Deal. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Lyra threw herself into the reform work with the same intensity she brought to healing. She attended council meetings, the first Omega to ever do so. She spoke at pack gatherings, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each speech. She trained other wolves to think critically, to question, to refuse easy answers. And slowly, the pack transformed. It wasn't easy. There was resistance. Wolves who clung to the old ways, who thought Omegas stepping above their station was dangerous. But Kale stood beside her through every challenge, his presence a shield and a promise. And gradually, others joined them. Dane. Elias, who proved to be a surprisingly progressive heir. Even some of the older council members who'd been shaken by how close they'd come to disaster. The pack was learning, growing, becoming something new. But not everyone was happy about it. On a cold winter evening, 6 months after Gregor announced the reforms, Lyra was working late in her clinic. Most of the pack had retired for the night, but she had a backlog of medicines to prepare. Winter always brought illness, and she wanted to be ready. She was so focused on grinding herbs that she didn't hear the door open. Didn't sense the presence until a blade pressed against her throat. Don't scream, a voice hissed in her ear. Male. Vaguely familiar. Don't move. Don't even breathe wrong, or I'll open your throat before your mate can reach you. Lyra froze. The mate bond flared with alarm. Kale would feel her fear, would be coming already. But would he be fast enough? What do you want? She asked carefully. I want you to stop. The blade pressed harder, and Lyra felt blood trickle down her neck. You and your reforms. You and your ideas about equality. You're destroying this pack. Destroying everything we've built. The hierarchy that let Alara nearly succeed. Lyra's voice was steady despite her terror. The system that almost killed the Alpha and his heir? That was one wolf. One anomaly. The man, she recognized him now as Garrett, a mid-ranked warrior who'd been vocal in his opposition to the reforms, sounded desperate. Unhinged. But you're trying to tear down centuries of tradition. Trying to make Omegas equal to Alphas. It's wrong. Why? Lyra asked. Because you're afraid of what happens when wolves like me have power? When we can question wolves like you? You're not supposed to have power. Garrett's voice rose. You're an Omega. You should be grateful we let you live, not trying to reshape the entire pack in your image. I'm not reshaping anything in my image. Lyra's mind raced. Kale was coming. She could feel him through the bond, moving fast, but she needed to keep Garrett talking. Keep him from doing something fatal. I'm just trying to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. That no one else gets blamed for crimes they didn't commit. That everyone has a voice. A chance. How is that destroying the pack? Because it makes us weak. Garrett pulled her backward, toward the door. We need hierarchy. We need strength. We need wolves to know their place. Without that, we're just. The door exploded inward. Kale stood in the doorway, and he looked like death itself. His eyes were pure wolf, glowing gold, feral with rage. His body was coiled, ready to spring. And the growl that emanated from his chest made Lyra's bones vibrate. Let her go. Each word was a promise of violence. Stay back. Garrett's blade pressed harder. Lyra gasped as it broke skin. Stay back or I'll kill her. If you hurt her, Kale's voice dropped even lower, I will make your death last days. I will make you beg for mercy you'll never receive. I will. Kale. Lyra's voice cut through his rage. Don't. He's scared. He doesn't know what else to do. I'm not scared, Garrett snarled. I'm trying to save. Lyra moved. She'd been learning self-defense from Kale over the past months. Learning to use her small size as an advantage. Learning that strength wasn't just physical. She dropped her weight suddenly, slipping under Garrett's arm. The blade scraped across her shoulder instead of her throat, painful but not fatal. She rolled away, and Kale was there in an instant. He slammed into Garrett with the force of a freight train. They went down in a tangle of limbs, but it was over in seconds. Kale had Garrett pinned, his hand around the other wolf's throat, his teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. Kale, stop. Lyra's voice was urgent. Don't kill him. Please. He tried to kill you. Kale's voice was barely human. I know. Lyra moved closer, her hand finding Kale's shoulder. The mate bond pulsed between them, soothing, grounding. But killing him won't help. It'll just prove his point, that we're too dangerous to have power. That we can't be trusted. I don't care about proving points. Kale's grip tightened on Garrett's throat. He hurt you. And I'm okay. Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. I'm okay, Kale. But I need you to be okay too. I need you to show everyone, that we're better than the old ways. That we don't answer violence with more violence unless we have no choice. Kale's eyes found hers. The rage was still there, but something else too. Trust. Love. The bond that connected them on a level deeper than either could articulate. Slowly, he released Garrett's throat. You're lucky, he said quietly, his voice still rough with barely controlled fury. Lucky that my mate is a better wolf than I am. Lucky that she believes in mercy. He hauled Garrett to his feet. But if you ever threaten her again, her mercy won't save you. Are we clear? Garrett nodded, gasping for air. By then, other wolves had arrived, Dane, Elias, several enforcers. They took Garrett into custody, leading him away to face judgment. The pack would decide his fate now under the new laws. The transparent, equitable system Lyra had helped build. When they were finally alone, Kale pulled Lyra into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever scare me like that again, he whispered into her hair. When I felt your fear through the bond, when I thought I might lose you. You won't lose me. Lyra wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart racing against hers. I'm right here. I'm safe. We're safe. He could have killed you. But he didn't. Lyra pulled back to look at him. Because you came. Because we're stronger together than we ever were apart. That's what the bond means, Kale. We protect each other. Kale cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. The thought of a world without you in it. Then don't think about it. Lyra kissed him softly. Think about our future. About the pack we're building. About the life we get to live together. Think about that instead. Cale kissed her back, deep and desperate and claiming. The mate bond flared between them, stronger than ever. A reminder that they'd survived. That they'd won. That love, real, true, tested love, was stronger than any poison, any conspiracy, any prejudice. They'd proven that. And they'd keep proving it, every single day. They survived. And they're making the pack better. Comment below what you loved most about the story. And if you're not subscribed, please hit that button. We have so many more emotional journeys to share with you. 1 year after the mate bond snapped into place, Lyra stood on the hillside overlooking pack territory and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. Below, the pack grounds bustled with activity. The new training center, where young wolves learned not just combat but healing, diplomacy, and critical thinking, was full of students. The expanded healing clinic had become a hub for not just medical care but education, with wolves of all ranks attending Lyra's lectures on herb lore and poison identification. And in the center of it all, the Great Hall had been renovated with transparent walls, symbolizing the new era of openness Gregor had committed to. The Pack Reform Act had passed unanimously 6 months ago. It hadn't been easy. There'd been challenges, resistance, wolves like Garrett who clung desperately to the old ways. But slowly, steadily, the pack had changed. Omegas no longer walked with their heads down. Enforcers were trained in restraint as much as combat. And the council now included representatives from every rank, ensuring that all voices were heard. It was everything Lyra had dreamed of but never dared hope for. Beautiful, isn't it? Cale's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested on her shoulder, and Lyra felt the contentment radiating through their bond. Our pack. Our home. Our pack, Lyra repeated, smiling. I still can't believe it sometimes. That I'm not just surviving here anymore. I'm actually living. You're thriving. Cale turned her in his arms so they were face to face. You've trained 15 new healers. Revolutionized the pack's approach to medicine and justice. Saved countless lives. His expression grew tender. And you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Lyra reached up to trace the scar on his jaw, a memento from the fight that had nearly killed them both. We made each other happy. That's how this works, remember? Together. Together, Cale agreed, kissing her softly. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and the warm spring breeze. The mate bond hummed between them, no longer the violent, desperate thing it had been in those early days, but something deeper. Steady. Unshakable. I have something to tell you, Lyra said finally, pulling back slightly. Cale's eyes searched hers, a hint of concern flickering in their amber depths. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Lyra's smile grew. Actually, something's very, very right. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. I'm pregnant, Cale. We're going to have a pup. Cale froze. His eyes went wide, and for a moment he just stared at her like he couldn't process the words. Then his face transformed, pure joy breaking through his usually controlled expression like sunrise. A pup? His voice was rough with emotion. We're having a pup? In about 6 months, according to the healer. Lyra was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment to tell you, and this felt. Cale kissed her, cutting off her words. It was a kiss filled with every emotion he struggled to express: love, gratitude, wonder, fierce protectiveness. When he finally pulled back, his own eyes were wet. A pup, he repeated, like he was testing the word. His hand splayed across her stomach, reverently. Our pup. Are you happy? Lyra asked, though she could feel his joy through the bond. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Cale's laugh was shaky. Terrified. Amazed. Grateful. He pressed his forehead to hers. A year ago, I was the Alpha's executioner. Alone. Empty. Ready to destroy you because I was ordered to. And now, he swallowed hard. Now I have everything. A mate I love more than my own life. A purpose beyond violence. And a family. We have a family, Lyra corrected. You, me, and this little one. She covered his hand with hers. Our own little pack. Our own little pack, Cale echoed. Then his expression shifted to something fierce and protective. They're going to grow up in a different world than we did. A better one. Where rank doesn't determine worth. Where omegas are valued. Where strength means more than just physical power. We'll make sure of it, Lyra promised. We're already making sure of it. That evening, they announced the pregnancy at a pack gathering. The response was overwhelming, cheers and congratulations, wolves coming forward to offer blessings and gifts. Alpha Gregor clasped Cale's shoulder with genuine warmth, while Elias promised to be the best uncle the pup could ask for. Even Dane, stoic as always, cracked a smile and muttered something about teaching the pup proper combat techniques. But it was the Omegas who moved Lyra most. They gathered around her, eyes shining with hope and pride. Because this wasn't just Lyra and Cale having a pup. This was proof that their world had changed. That an Omega could mate an enforcer, a beta, and raise their child with dignity and respect. That anything was possible now. Late that night, after the celebrations had died down and they'd returned to their quarters, larger now, befitting Cale's position as beta, but still cozy and filled with Lyra's healing herbs, they lay in bed together. Cale's hand resting protectively on Lyra's stomach. Tell me what you're thinking, Lyra said softly. I'm thinking about the first time I saw you. Cale's voice was quiet in the darkness. Chained. Terrified. Certain you were going to die. And I'm thinking about how I was supposed to be your executioner. How close I came to following those orders without question. But you didn't. Lyra turned to face him. The bond stopped you. The bond showed me the truth. Cale's thumb brushed across her stomach. That you were everything I didn't know I needed. That mercy wasn't weakness, it was the greatest strength of all. He paused. You changed me, Lyra. Fundamentally. The wolf I was a year ago wouldn't recognize the wolf I am now. Good, Lyra said fiercely. Because I love the wolf you are now. The one who chose compassion over cruelty. Who stood beside me when everyone else wanted me dead. Who helped me change an entire pack's culture because he believed it was right. We changed it together, Cale corrected. I was just the muscle. You were the vision. We complemented each other. Lyra kissed him softly. That's what makes us strong. Not that we're the same, but that we're different in ways that fit perfectly. Like a key and a lock, Cale murmured. Like the moon and the tide, Lyra countered. Like a knife and its sheath. Like a wound and its cure. They smiled at each other in the darkness, playing their game. Finding metaphors for what they meant to each other. For the bond that had started as violence and transformed into the greatest gift either had ever received. I love you, Cale said simply. More than I have words for. I love you too, Lyra replied. And I'm so grateful the moon chose you for me. Even if the path to get here was terrifying. Especially because the path was terrifying, Cale said. Because it means we fought for this. We earned it. No one can take it away from us. No one would dare, Lyra said with a small laugh. Not with the pack's beta and head healer as parents. Our pup is going to be the most protected wolf in the territory. Damn right they are. Cale's voice held a note of steel. Then it softened. But we'll also teach them to be kind. Compassionate. To question authority when it's wrong. To stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. He paused. We'll teach them to be like you. And strong, Lyra added. Brave. Loyal. We'll teach them to be like you too. Then they'll be perfect, Cale said. The months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Lyra's clinic continued to thrive, though she gradually shifted more responsibilities to her apprentices as her pregnancy progressed. Cale took on additional duties as beta, working closely with Gregor and Elias to ensure the reforms were properly implemented and protected. They prepared a nursery in their quarters, a bright, warm space filled with soft blankets and carved wooden toys that pack members crafted as gifts. Dane, awkward but sincere, presented them with a tiny wooden sword. For when they're older, he'd muttered, embarrassed. The pack rallied around them in ways that still surprised Lyra. Wolves who'd once called for her execution now offered advice on child rearing. The council voted to establish a fund for new parents, ensuring that no wolf, regardless of rank, would struggle to provide for their pups. The changes kept rippling outward. On a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after Lyra had shared her news with Cale, their daughter was born. The labor was long and difficult. Lyra's omega frame made childbirth challenging, but she refused any painkillers that might affect the pup. Cale stayed by her side through every contraction, his hand crushed in hers, his presence the anchor she needed. When their daughter finally entered the world, tiny and perfect and screaming with outrage, Lyra burst into tears of pure joy. "She's beautiful," the healer said, placing the pup in Lyra's arms. "Strong lungs. Healthy heartbeat. Perfect." Lyra stared down at her daughter, their daughter, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known possible. The pup had Cale's dark hair and her green eyes. She was small, but Lyra could already sense the strength in her. The spirit. "Hello, little one," Lyra whispered. "Welcome to the world." Cale knelt beside the bed, his hand gentle on the pup's downy head. His expression was one of absolute wonder. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Lyra, she's perfect." "What should we name her?" Lyra asked. They'd discussed names for months, but never settled on one. Now, looking at their daughter, Lyra knew exactly what felt right. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name should be Hope, because that's what she represents. What we've built. A new beginning. A better future." Cale's eyes filled with tears, something Lyra had only seen a handful of times. "Hope," he repeated. "Perfect." Their daughter, Hope, yawned and settled into Lyra's arms, already falling asleep with the confidence of a pup who knew she was safe. Loved. Protected. Alpha Gregor came to visit the next morning, along with Elias and most of the council. They brought gifts and blessings, and Gregor himself placed a hand on Hope's forehead in the traditional gesture of pack acceptance. "She will grow up strong," he said formally. "Protected by this pack. Valued for who she is, not what rank she's born into." This I swear is Alpha. It was more than ceremony. It was a promise. A commitment to the new world they'd built. 2 years later, Lyra stood in the same spot on the hillside where she'd told Cale about her pregnancy. But this time, she wasn't alone. Hope toddled beside her, chasing butterflies with the determined focus only a 2-year-old could manage. She was small for her age. She'd likely be an omega like her mother, but fierce. Already showing signs of the healer's gift, bringing Lyra, hurt, flowers to fix and fretting over her father's training bruises. Cale appeared at the crest of the hill, back from a patrol. Hope squealed with delight and ran to him, her little legs pumping. He caught her and swung her high, her laughter ringing out across the valley. "Daddy, Daddy, I caught a butterfly." "Did you?" Cale's voice was full of exaggerated wonder. "Was it a big one?" "Huge." Hope spread her arms as wide as they would go. "This big? That's amazing, little wolf." Cale kissed her nose and set her down. "Why don't you go show Mama?" Hope ran back to Lyra, chattering about her butterfly adventure. Lyra listened with a smile, her heart full to bursting. This was her life now. Not surviving. Not hiding. Not making herself small. Living. Thriving. Building something beautiful with a mate who'd been meant to destroy her, but had chosen to love her instead. "I was thinking," Cale said, joining them and pulling Lyra against his side. "About where we started. About that day in the punishment circle." "Don't," Lyra said softly. "That's behind us." "I know. But I want to remember it anyway." Cale's voice was thoughtful. "Because it reminds me of how close we came to losing everything. How easily I could have followed orders. How the moon had to literally throw us together to make me see what I was about to destroy. The moon knew, Lyra said simply. She knew we needed each other. That we'd make each other better. Stronger. The moon was right. Kale watched Hope chase another butterfly, his expression soft. Look at what we've built. A family. A new pack culture. A future worth fighting for. He turned to Lyra. I was sent to punish you. To break you. To cast you out to die. Instead, you claimed me, Lyra finished. Instead, I claimed you, Kale agreed. And you claimed me right back. Saved me from a life of empty violence. Gave me purpose. Gave me love. Gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Lyra corrected. She stood on her toes to kiss him. That's what mates do. We save each other. Hope ran back to them, throwing her arms around both their legs. Love you, Mama. Love you, Daddy. We love you too, little wolf, Lyra and Kale said together. And standing there on the hillside, with their daughter between them and the pack they'd transformed spread out below, Lyra thought about the Omega who'd knelt in chains a little over 3 years ago. The wolf who'd been certain she would die. Who'd never imagined she could be loved, valued, cherished. That Omega was gone. In her place stood a healer, a reformer, a mother, a mate. A wolf who'd taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into something beautiful. Who'd looked at an executioner and seen a partner. Who'd faced down death and chosen to live fiercely, fully, without apology. What are you thinking? Kale asked softly. Lyra smiled. I'm thinking that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we'll ever have. I'm thinking that I wouldn't change a single moment of our story, not even the terrifying parts. Because they led us here. To this. To us. To our family, Kale added. To our family, Lyra agreed. Hope tugged on their hands. Come on. I want to show you the big rock I found. They let her lead them down the hillside, toward home, toward the life they'd built together. Toward the future they'd fight to protect for as long as the moon lit the sky. Kale had been sent to punish her. Instead, he'd claimed her. And together, they'd claimed something even more precious, a love that had survived poison, conspiracy, and death itself. A love that had transformed not just themselves, but an entire pack. A love that would endure forever. I'm literally sobbing happy tears. What an incredible journey from that terrifying punishment circle to this, a family, a transformed pack, and a love that conquered everything. What was your favorite moment in this story? Drop it in the comments below. And if you loved this emotional roller coaster, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thank you so much for being here, for reading, for being part of this amazing community. You all mean the world to me. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep fighting for what's right, and remember, sometimes the worst moments lead to the most beautiful endings. Love you all.